Destiny has featured some incredible weapons in the Iron Banner loot pool, but many of the community favorites have actually never made their way into Destiny 2 yet. In this video, I wanted to take a look at some of the past Iron Banner weapons and theorycraft how good they might be if they were ported over to Destiny 2. This isn't to say that we haven't had some amazing Iron Banner weapons in Destiny 2. The Godroll Hero's Burden, for example, is the strongest SMG in the game in my opinion. And of course, we've already had the legendary Felwinter's Lie dominate PvP for many seasons since coming back into the game. But there's so many amazing ones that haven't shown up yet, so let's take a look at a few of the top picks, starting off with Year 1 Iron Banner weapons in vanilla Destiny. First on our list is an absolute legend in the sniping category that changed the meta in many ways when it was released, the Aphrodite Spear. I have quite a bit to say about this one, as it was one of the most meta-defining weapons in the history of Destiny for many reasons. This was a high-impact sniper similar to the Frozen Orbit of modern Destiny. It had a fantastic range stat, and as we now know, a high range stat really helps the aim assist cone stay magnetic over a longer distance. Aphrodite started out one of the most funny and most annoying metas of early Destiny, the armor-piercing round wallbangs. For those of you who didn't play during this era, this was the time in Destiny where armor-piercing round weapons literally allowed you to shoot through thin walls and objects. This allowed you to land easy kills on enemies that literally couldn't do anything back to you. Picture Nuke from CS 1.6 for my fellow Counter-Strike fans out there. Not only were armor-piercing rounds incredibly powerful by themselves, but Aphrodites also had access to the perk Final Round. Here, the last bullet in your magazine would deal bonus damage similar to Destiny 2's High Impact Reserve perk, but even more deadly. For quite a long time, you'd hear a majority of Trials matches starting off with sniper ammo shots being fired off across the map. Players would dump the first 2 bullets of their 3-round magazine so that their last shot could one-hit kill to the body, and if you had armor-piercing rounds as well, you could do this through walls. It was an absolutely ridiculous meta that rightfully got nerfed over time. After the changes, armor-piercing rounds couldn't shoot through nearly as many objects anymore, and Final Round was changed to only buff precision damage. As annoying as it was in the meta, I have to admit it was pretty hilarious wallbanging enemies with a single body shot before it became the crutch of literally every Trials team trying to reach the lighthouse. Even though the armor-piercing round Final Round combo was certainly very strong, there is actually another role that was more rare but perhaps equally powerful for players who knew how it worked. Aphrodites also had access to both Double Down and Field Scout. With this combo, players would start a Trials match with their Double Down Field Scout Aphrodite Spear out to maximize their sniper ammo on the start of a match. Then after the first round, they would switch snipers to whatever their preferred normal PvP role was. Unlike Destiny 2, back in early Destiny, you didn't lose all of your special ammo as long as you swap weapons either while you were dead or between rounds. This made Aphrodites a very popular pick for the first round in Trials, even if a player would swap to a different sniper for subsequent rounds. Whether you are abusing one-shot wallbang kills, spawning in with maximum sniper ammo for an entire match, or just using a nice PvP role, there's no doubt that Aphrodites was a meta-defining sniper. But in Destiny 2, how good would it actually be? We've seen a rise in the popularity of high-impact snipers with options like the Frozen Orbit, but Aphrodites actually had a fairly low aim assist stat compared to many competitive snipers, and the gimmicks that made it so popular back in Destiny 1 probably wouldn't work in the Destiny 2 sandbox, so I think it would definitely be used for some nostalgia, but probably not anywhere near the strength of its original entry into the franchise. The Timur's Lash was a high-impact hand cannon in Destiny 1 similar to the Steady Hand. I'll never forget running a strike with a friend in early Destiny using this thing when my friend asked me, "What the heck are you using?" as I popped about 20 drag heads off in a row. The fun thing about this gun was that you could roll the perks in many different ways to be excellent in PvE or PvP. You had the typical options like Outlaw and Crowd Control, which was a D1 Rampage, or Reactive Reload, which was D1 Kill Clip. But you could also go for a more rangy role with perks like Send It and Rangefinder, and it had some great options like Quick Draw, Explosive Rounds, and Luck in the Chamber to open up a lot of great possibilities for PvP. Not to mention, it also had that lengthy barrel model, which as we know today is actually a real benefit in Destiny. So how good would Timur's Lash be in the current sandbox? Well, 120 RPMs have certainly had their time to shine in Forsaken with True Prophecy, the Steady Hand, the Bottom Dollar, and the Igneous Hammer. Although these are still great options in general, they aren't the same meta slayers compared to much of last year. But since Timur's had Reactive Reload, it could potentially compete with some of the remaining 120s that can still 2-tap like the Criminal's Dagger and Loud Lullaby. With some really nice perks available and a great weapon model, I think it could actually be fairly popular in the current sandbox. Jolders Hammer was a heavy-hitting machine gun that dominated the heavy slot in PvP for quite a while after being released. Back in Destiny 1, the aggressive ballistics barrel option actually gave you more impact, so if you paired this with Crowd Control, you could wipe an entire team pretty fast with the outgoing damage. It also had options like Hidden Hand for more aim assist, Counterbalance and Rodeo to control the recoil, and Persistence to improve accuracy while firing continuously. It also had the perk Take a Knee, which was similar to our modern Firmly Planted perk. This was a crazy great perk that would reduce recoil, improve aim down sight speeds, and reduce flinch while crouched, as well as improving accuracy. Jolders was a beast in D1 PvP, but how good would it be today? Generally, machine guns are dominated by the 450 RPM options like the Commemoration or the Corrective Measure. We did recently get the Archon's Thunder, which is a slower firing 360, but it's not seen all that often in PvP. On paper, the 900 RPMs are actually the best options for kill time, but it can be tough to control their recoil at a high rate of fire. I think Jolders could be interesting in Destiny 2, but unless it was a stat monster, I'm not sure how much of a splash it would really make. Also in the heavy slot, we had the Rattagas Fury. This was an Iron Banner rocket launcher that could roll with the classic Destiny 1 PvP perk, Grenades and Horseshoes. This made landing rocket hits trivially easy because you could just aim directly at enemies instead of having to jump up in the air and shoot down at the ground like Halo. Grenades and Horseshoes rockets in Destiny 1 were some of the most free kills that you could possibly get, and they gave you an insane amount of super energy per kill. So smart players would spend their super first and then get a few heavy kills to get most of the way back to their next super in just a few seconds. It also had access to Clown Cartridge, so if you got lucky, you could actually reload and get an extra rocket. Javelin was available to increase the rocket velocity, and Heavy Payload increased the blast radius. Rockets seem to have become a bit more popular recently in Destiny 2, but it's really just the big exotics like the Wardcliff Coil and the Gallarhorn that are getting the spotlight. Destiny 2 legendary rockets just don't have the same multi-kill potential as pulling 4 rockets from a single heavy crate in Destiny 1. This is another weapon that I think wouldn't get a ton of love in PvP unless it came with some crazy version of Grenades and Horseshoes for the proximity detonation. Cylimars Wrath was a max rate of fire auto rifle similar to the Bullet Hose Atheon's Epilogue. It has some really solid perks like Counterbalance, Perfect Balance, and Fitted Stock for recoil control, and Persistence for accuracy. It could also get some really nice damage perks like Reactive Reload, Crowd Control, or Glass Half Full. Theoretically, I believe you could even get a roll with multiple damage perks. We've seen how powerful that can be in Destiny 2 with weapons like the Kindled Orchid rocking Kill Clip and Rampage at the same time. I would really love to see some of these 900 RPM bullet hoses make their way into Destiny 2 at some point. I think they'd play so well in the current sandbox, and there's a number of infamous ones to pick from like the Cylimars, the Epilogue, the Doctrine, and of course the Necrochasm. My final pick from the Year 1 Iron Banner weapons was the Skorri's Revenge. This was a high rate of fire pulse like the Grasp of Moloch or the modern day Darkest Before. This pulse had a ton of great consistency perks to control the recoil and damage perks to boost the lethality, but it also had some more rare perks like Secret Round, where missing a shot from the burst would fire an extra bullet. Maybe not the strongest option out there, but it was definitely an interesting idea. We've seen these high rate of fire pulses perform pretty well recently with options like the Darkest Before and the Grid Skipper. I don't think they would come in and dominate the meta by any means, but it still could be a pretty nice dueling option to add to the Destiny 2 arsenal. Moving on to Year 2 Iron Banner weapons, we have the Nerwins Mercy, easily one of the most popular Iron Banner weapons in Year 2. Tons of you wrote in the Nerwins Mercy on my tweet asking which Iron Banner weapons you'd like to try out in Destiny 2. Nerwins was a 66 rate of fire pulse rifle, which I believe would map over to the current 390 RPM pulses in Destiny 2. Like most of the other Iron Banner weapons, it also had some great perks. Depending on your role, you could build it for stability, range, or utility regeneration. It also had Third Eye to keep your radar up at all times even while aiming down sights to improve your awareness. The main thing I remember about this pulse is just how consistent and forgiving it felt. Sure, maybe it wouldn't insta-kill an enemy across the map like the Messenger, but it was just such a consistent feeling weapon. I think consistency and forgiveness is something we don't really value enough in Destiny 2 weapons. It's easy to just look at a spreadsheet and determine the optimal time to kill, but if a weapon feels good and easy to use and is pretty forgiving, it can really help you to win some duels. I think if Nerwins made it into Destiny 2, it would definitely give some favorite pulses in that category a run for their money, but it certainly wouldn't hold a candle to something like a Desperado Messenger in the lethality department. Finnala's Peril was a 140 RPM equivalent hand cannon from the Iron Banner, which would be similar to the Ice Luna. It was packed with perks that allowed it to be used in many different ways, and like the Timur's Lash, it featured quite a long barrel. Most notably, it had access to Rangefinder, which the community has crowned an S tier perk for PvP hand cannons. It also had perks like Hammer Forged, Hand Loaded, and Rifled Barrel to extend the range, as well as explosive rounds. There's a constant discussion in D2 endgame PvP circles about which perk is better, Rangefinder or Explosive Payload. Well, Finnala's could actually get both. It could also get Icarus for some improved in-air accuracy, which was fairly rare on Destiny 1 hand cannons. It could get Hidden Hand for some extra aim assist and Reactive Reload or Luck in the Chamber for more lethality. Overall, it was just a great hand cannon, and we've seen 140s really rise in prominence again with the Palindrome, the Fatebringer, and now the Ice Luna. So I think a good roll on the Finnalas could definitely fit right into the picture. Next on our list is the Iron Wreath D. This was a great option for any Guardian wanting to roleplay as James Bond with the Silence PP7. In Destiny 1, sidearms occupied the special ammo slot and were an interesting alternative to the typical snipers, shotguns, and fusions seen in PvP. The Iron Wreath in particular was a scary sidearm in the hands of good player. I want to specifically shout out KJ Hovey, who is probably my favorite YouTuber in Destiny 1. He was a menace with the No Land Beyond and the Iron Wreath together. This sidearm in a lot of ways filled a similar role to that of the Last Word. It could shut down shotgun rushers if you could keep your distance and backpedal effectively. And with lethality perks like crowd control or reactive reload, one kill could definitely turn into multiple. It also featured quick draw, which made it especially good for pairing with a long range weapon like the No Land Beyond, a pulse rifle, or a scout rifle. Today we've seen a few sidearms work really well, especially when paired with a sniper rifle. They seem to be more popular on console than PC, but players who are talented with a sidearm and know how to master their effective range can be really frustrating to play against. The Haakon's Hatchet was an 88 rate of fire auto rifle, which was on the faster side of the RPM spectrum, but not quite the bullet hose like the Cylimars Wrath. I don't want to go into crazy depth on this one, but we've seen the 720 RPM auto rifles playing pretty well in the meta recently, albeit not quite as hot as that season where the 600 RPM auto rifles like the Gnawing Hunger were dominating the meta. In Destiny 1, this auto had a lot of great roles to optimize for range with perks like Rangefinder, Hand-Loaded, and Rifled Barrel. And that's where these auto rifles tend to struggle a bit in the current sandbox since they share a lot of optimal range with SMGs, which are just a bit easier to use. So if it came back with some really solid range and lethality perks, I think it could find a nice spot in the meta, but it wouldn't be game breaking by any means. In Year 3, we had some of the coolest looking Iron Banner guns in my opinion. I just love the aesthetics of many of these, and some of them were very powerful as well. Starting off with the Unbent Tree, this was another bullet hose archetype of auto rifle. We've already covered the Cylimars, so I don't want to go into crazy depth here, but essentially I'd love to see this archetype return into Destiny 2, whether that's bringing back some of our old favorites or introducing some new bullet hoses for us to enjoy. I think with a nice high range roll, these could be incredibly fun to use and perform really well in PvP. The Lingering Song was a high impact hand cannon with a very special trick. It can get its magazine size incredibly low with various combinations of magazine reducing perks like Braced Frame and Small Bore. Usually you'd want a big magazine on your hand cannon, right? Well, the Lingering Song could also roll luck in the chamber. So if you got your magazine down to say 4 bullets, you know that 1 out of those 4 is going to do bonus damage, leading to an easy 2-tap. This was definitely a very niche weapon, but it was a lot of fun to go for those 2-taps without even needing to get a kill first. Personally, I'm glad that we kept luck in the chamber back in Destiny 1 for now. It was a lot of fun at times, but I'm not a huge fan of randomness in PvP, so if this one comes back, I hope it's just a solid hand cannon instead of one relying on bullet RNG. Getting lucky with the Iron Banner loot table is enough RNG for me to handle. The Laughing Heart was one of the most stylish sniper rifles in Destiny history. Just look at this thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was an archetype that we actually don't have in Destiny 2. It was a 26 rate of fire stat, which I think would put it somewhere between the 90 RPM 1000 yard stare and the 140 RPM Styxs Revenge. Most importantly though, it had access to Snapshot, which is nearly an essential perk for PvP for a sniper to feel good. It also had access to Hidden Hand for extra aim assist or Unflinching to cut down on the weapon flinch. I would love to give this thing a spin in Destiny 2. I'm just not sure if they'd want to create a whole new archetype for it or just modify it to fit what we currently have. The Distant Star was a 42 rate of fire scout rifle, which matches the rate of fire of the Mida multi-tool. It had a great perk selection, making it useful for either PvE or PvP. In Destiny 1, we had many larger PvP maps which made scouts a lot more viable. Unfortunately, in Destiny 2 though, most of the ones offering longer lanes have been sunset, so scouts don't see a whole lot of play. The Mida multi-tool itself is still pretty solid with its movement buff and high aim assist, but I'm not really sure how good a legendary version would do without the same benefits. My guess is that we wouldn't see this one too much in PvP, but who knows, maybe we're up for a scout rifle meta again someday like vanilla Destiny 2. And of course, we can't forget about one of the strongest Iron Banner weapons of all time, the Clever Dragon. This was a max rate of fire pulse rifle that just shredded targets in PvP. I still remember being almost in shock at how good this pulse rifle was in the Crucible when I first got my hands on it. It brought back the feeling of pulse rifle dominance like the Hawksaw era, except with even more lethality. In my eyes, the Clever Dragon is basically the measuring stick for how good a high rate of fire pulse rifle can be in PvP. It can get great range and stability rolls and great options for ease of use. It was just a 10 out of 10 pulse rifle all around. Like I mentioned with the Skorri's Revenge earlier, these high rate of fire pulse rifles have been pretty strong in PvP lately, but not really meta defining by any means. I think if one of these pulses was to come back into the game and truly create a pulse rifle meta, it might be the Clever Dragon. In the history of Destiny, this was easily one of the strongest pulse rifles ever created, and I wonder if Bungie even thought it was a bit hot out of the gate. I would love to try this thing out again in Destiny 2, although I am a bit scared of the day it might come back into the Crucible. What weapons would you want to include on this list? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. And if you want to see another one, check out my recent video on the best Trials of Osiris weapons from Destiny 1. It's the video on the top right of your screen and also linked in the description.